Okay, this week we are going to be doing a gospel contemplation on two separate but connected passages from the end of Matthew 13 and from the start of Matthew 14. If you've never done a gospel contemplation before, I hope you really enjoy this. A few of us have got into the habit of doing this regularly as a way of reading the Bible and letting the living word of God speak to us in a different way to how we can do normally if we just read the words. And I guess this really engages our imagination. So in order to do this well, I'm probably on a television in your living room or on an iPad somewhere or a laptop or something. You need to be able to be fairly comfortable while listening to this. So try not to be like leaning in, but leaning back to sort of rest while you listen to the words. We'll read the scriptures together. I'll read them. Then you, and I'll try and lead you in some imaginative exercises. So you need to be comfortable in order to do that. So if you figure out how you do that and how you posture yourself. But let's pray and then we'll get going. God, thank you so much that you're with us in each of our settings, in each of the rooms that we're currently sitting in. And I pray that your Holy Spirit would breathe through this time, through the words that are spoken and through our imaginations. We give you permission to speak to us, bring your word to life in the world that we're living in right now. Whatever it is that each of us are carrying, I pray that you would help us to put it down for a minute so that we can hear from you. Give us perspective, give us insight, and give us courage as we hear what it is you want to say to us today. Amen. Okay, so this is the end of Matthew 13, and it's known as a prophet without honor. Verses 53 to 58. So I'll read them and then I'm going to read them twice, and then we're going to do another exercise with the start of chapter 14. Pretty different stories. That's when John the Baptist gets his head chopped off, and this is when Jesus is not treated with honor in his hometown. So the reason why they're connected is because those are two particularly low moments for Jesus. And so if you are in a place of disappointment right now, I pray that today's meeting, this whole thing we're doing, this gospel contemplation, would speak to you deeply, because this is where Jesus is in a place of kind of failure, I suppose. And he is able to accept that and work with it and live through it, but it's hard. And then when his cousin has his head chopped off and he finds out, that's also a place of deep grief and desperation for him. And this is significance because Jesus knows that's a sign of what is to come for his own journey when that happens. So maybe you're also in a place of life where you're considering what's next and maybe a new move and so on. It's just good to know that you're in good company, that Jesus has been there too. He's lived through the desperation, the hardness, the impossible decisions. He's with you right now in that. So I'm going to read this once, and then I'll read it again slowly, and I'll start to draw out and help you imagine some things. After I've read it for the first time, I need you to pick a character in this story and imagine being them. And you could be one of the characters that are named, but you could also be an onlooker, or you could just imagine, well, I'll be, this person who doesn't have any lines in the story, but I'll look at the story from their perspective. Because what you're going to do in a gospel contemplation is imagine actually being there while this is happening. Okay, so verse 53 of chapter 13. When Jesus had finished these parables, he moved on from there. Coming to his hometown, he began teaching the people in their synagogue, and they were amazed. Where did this man get this wisdom and these miraculous powers? They asked. Isn't this the carpenter's son? Isn't his mother's name Mary? And aren't his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? Aren't all his sisters with us? Where then did this man get all these things?" And they took offence at him. But Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honour, except in his own town and in his own home." And he did not do many miracles there because of their lack of faith. Okay, so I need you now to pick a character in that story. So you can be Jesus. It doesn't mean that you're claiming to be the Son of God if you choose to be Jesus in the story. What would it have been like for him as a man, knowing all of that he knows about what he is going to be and become and who he's been created to be, and knowing all of that, also knowing the history, knowing the people in the room really well, like, because whilst they're looking at him going, "Isn't he the carpenter's son?" And he's thinking, "Yeah, and you're the fishmonger's son, and yep, I know you, and I know what you were like when we were younger." He's in his hometown. So maybe you want to imagine being Jesus, or perhaps you want to be somebody who grew up with Jesus, or the mother of someone who grew up with Jesus. Maybe you want to be Mary or Joseph, thinking, "Yep, he is that guy, but there's also more to it." Maybe you want to be one of Jesus' siblings or his disciples going, "I've never been here. Why are these guys so rude to him? Like, everyone else is amazed by him and they really love him." Or maybe there's someone completely different. But just take a minute to just decide, who are you going to be? Okay, I'll read it again slowly and really let your imagination run wild and let it come to life. When Jesus had finished these parables, he moved on from there. Coming to his hometown, he began teaching the people in the synagogue, and they were amazed. So imagine what it would be like when Jesus was arriving in that hometown. Was there conversation going on the streets as he was walking in with the disciples? What did it feel like? Was it hot when they arrived? Did they arrive in morning, afternoon, evening? Were they hungry? Was there a busy marketplace? Were there traders? Were people asking questions in the street? He got to the synagogue. What was that like? Jesus would have known that building inside out. Where would he have stood or sat in the synagogue? Was there a service already going on? Did they join in? How did the people express their amazement? Did some of them have faith? Were some of them thinking, maybe this guy really is who he says he is? Others were less sure. Some of them said, "Where did this man get this wisdom and these miraculous powers?" So they knew that he was the carpenter's son, and they knew his mother's name was Mary. And they're asking where he got his miraculous powers from. So they're thinking, I think I know where he comes from. And that was a bit controversial. Did she get pregnant before they got married? Was there another guy involved? Was it the carpenter? I think there was some rumours about that. Anyway, where does all this wisdom come from? Where has he been recently? Did he get trained up by a rabbi somewhere else? Is he a zealot? Is he a Pharisee? No. So who is he then? Who is this guy? There's wisdom coming from somewhere else. Is it good wisdom? Is there a weird demonic power coming from him? It doesn't seem to make sense. What did that feel like for those people? And the brothers were James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas. And the sisters were with them. This just doesn't add up. He seems to be claiming more than can possibly be true. So they took offence at him. What did that look like? What did their facial expressions look like? What did they say? What noises did they make? Did they tut and roll their eyes or leave the building, walk out? How did they express their offence? Why did it offend them? Why didn't they just disagree with him? And then Jesus says, a prophet is not without honour, except in his own town and in his own home. What did it sound like when he said that? What tone of voice did he use? Was it what I just said, or was it a different tone of voice? Did he say it with a smile in his face, or was it one of those moments where it was a mic drop moment and no one else knew how to react? Did he hold the silence afterwards? And he did not do many miracles there because of their lack of faith. What miracles did he do then? Why did he do those miracles? Would he have done more because of if they had loads of faith? Is it that he chose to not do more miracles because they didn't have faith? Or is it because their faith was small that the miracles didn't work? Maybe you imagine Jesus leaving the town after this and going on. What was that like? What were the conversations on the road like? Was there a disappointment in Jesus? Could you sense that if you were a disciple? Did he feel let down, misunderstood? Even though he's God and he knew what was really happening, was he sad? Did he feel like they'd missed it? Or did he just know that that was never going to happen? And were the disciples sad? Were they hoping for a bit of a homecoming celebration? Like when great sport heroes come back to this country having won somewhere else. Almost like a hero's return. And that just really didn't happen. How did the disciples feel about that? Okay, just pause the video now and just give yourself an extra 2 minutes in silence. Be brave and hold the silence. Don't just chat away. And after the 2 minutes, press pause and in twos, discuss what was that like for you. How did the word become real and living and breathing? What did you imagine in that? Who were you? And what happened in that imagination? Okay, so we'll do that and then press play again and we're going to do John the Baptist losing his head. Okay, so chapter 14 of the Gospel of Matthew, and this one is verses 1 to 12. It's a story that you'll probably be familiar with. It's gruesome, it's brutal. It's bizarre, actually. It's like something out of Game of Thrones. It's a really weird court setting, like king and court kind of setting. There's drunkenness, there's bad decisions. It's all happening in this story. It leads to, if we just read the verse after it, which precedes the feeding of the 5,000, we see Jesus' reaction to it. So when he hears the news that John the Baptist has had his head chopped off, it says, when Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. Hearing this, the crowds followed him on foot into the towns, and when Jesus saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them and healed them, because he's amazing. But when he hears the news about his cousin John, he goes and grieves in a solitary place on his own. So this hits Jesus hard. This is disappointment time for Jesus, and it's significant time because he knows what it signifies in terms of the prophecies being fulfilled about the voice crying in the wilderness that will see, that point the way to the Messiah. And when that last prophet is killed, there's a sign that Jesus is now his time. So Jesus is clocking all that sort of stuff. But it's this story that triggers all of that. And then the feeding of the 5,000. So this is what happens. At that time, Herod, the Tetrarch, heard the reports about Jesus. He was basically the king, except he wasn't a king. He was kind of like a, fake king, a steward king. And he said to his attendants, "This is John the Baptist. He has risen from the dead. That is why miraculous powers are at work in him." Now, Herod had arrested John and bound him and put him in prison because of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife. For John had been saying to him, "It is not lawful for you to have her." Basically, he was living with his brother's wife as if they were man and wife. And John was saying, "That's not okay, mate. You can't do that." Remember, King Herod is kind of in charge of the law, which is why when Jesus gets crucified, he gets sent to Herod on the way, because he should be in charge of the law for what happens to the Jewish people. So then it's going to be pretty annoying if John's saying you're breaking the law. I mean, I know it's hard to imagine having a leader who's in charge of your country that breaks the law. But anyway, you'll just have to stretch your imagination as far as you possibly can to think of that. Sorry, shouldn't have. That was a bit annoying. Anyway, Herod wanted to kill John, but was afraid of the people because they considered John a prophet. On Herod's birthday, the daughter of Herodias danced for the guests and pleased Herod so much that he promised with an oath to give her whatever she asked. Prompted by her mother, she said, "Give me here on a platter the head of John the Baptist." The king, Herod, was distressed. But because of his oaths and his dinner guests, he ordered that her request be granted and had John beheaded in the prison. His head was brought in on a platter and given to the girl, who carried it to her mother. John's disciples came and took his body and buried it. Then they went and told Jesus. Okay, so for this Gospel's contemplation, get yourself sitting comfortably, as comfortable as you can for a beheading. Imagine who you're going to be in this story. Are you going to be Herod? Could be like, I kind of like this guy, but he keeps really annoying me. He keeps, I'm sort of drawn to him. I can tell he's a powerful guy, but he keeps saying stuff about me that's just really not good. And if I've got him in prison, I've got him contained. Then you've promised to do anything. The ego, the hubris, the generosity. And then you're like, oh no. The fall from grace. What am I going to do now? I've got to kill him. If I kill him, people are going to kick off because they really like him. He's got himself in a catch-22. So he could be Herod. Maybe you want to be Herodias. Why did she suggest that idea? Had she been thinking about it for a long time? Why did that occur to her as an idea? She was in another version of this story elsewhere in a different gospel. It says that Herod offered up to a third of his kingdom. Why did she not say, "I'll have that then, I'll have a third of your kingdom"? Or why did she not want wealth or property? Instead, she just wanted a dead man's head. What a bizarre request. What was it like to be the girl, Salome, as we know her to be called? Why did she go with it? Was she afraid of her mother? Why didn't she ask for something else? Did it gross her out? A dead head arrives on a plate. There must have been blood everywhere. What a grim sight. What a weird birthday present. Did she really want that? Maybe you want to be an onlooker in the court. Maybe you're someone who was watching on and thinking of seeing this happen and kind of going with it. And then were you like, was it a kind of some sort of weird hype moment where everyone was like delighted by the sight of this head? Or was it a sobering moment where everyone suddenly went, what have we done? That's horrendous. What was the vibe like in the room? Maybe you're one of John's disciples picking up the body later and burying it and going to tell the disciples of Jesus and Jesus himself. So, or maybe you want to be John the Baptist. I don't know. That could be a crazy thing to imagine. Either way, pick a person and stick with that person. Don't change while you're mid-imagination, but just stick with it. At that time, Herod the Tetrarch heard the reports about Jesus, and he said to his attendants, "This is John the Baptist. He has risen from the dead. And that is why miraculous powers are at work in him." Now, Herod had arrested John and bound him and put him in prison because of Herodias, the brother of Philip's wife. For John had been saying to him, "It's not lawful for you to have her." So imagine to yourself now, what was that prison like that John was in? Was it underneath the palace that Herod lived in? Was it in a different building? Was it gross? Don't imagine it was like a modern day prison with a big bars on the walls and windows. Were there any windows? Was it cold? Was it damp? Was there like moss and mold everywhere? Was it mud? Was it more like a cesspit? Was it lonely for John? What's it like to be for Herod, thinking this guy sees clearly? Maybe somewhere in his conscience he knew that he was right, that John was right. Was Herod terrified of him? Did he wish he just would go away? But maybe somewhere part of him wanted to be found out and wanted to be called out. So perhaps he sort of almost admired John in a way. And he knew that the people loved him because he was a prophet. Did he think maybe he's a prophet? Did he ever think that? Or did he just think, nah, he's just an annoying character that I need to get rid of at some point? What was this banquet like that's going on as Herodias' daughter is dancing? What does that sound like? Is there like instruments? Is there music? Is there clapping? What were the outfits like? Were there all sorts of social taboos being broken or exposed or happening? Was there hysterical laughter? Was there drunkenness? Were people falling all over the place? Was it hot in the room? Was there wine flowing everywhere? And then when Herod says, "You can have whatever you like," to Salome, the daughter of Herodias, what happens then? Do people go silent? Is it kind of one of those moments in a film where all the music stops straight away and everyone turns and looks, or is it quite an intimate conversation? Is she like sitting on his knee or something where he says, you can have whatever you like? And what does it look like when she then asks Herodias, her mother, for that thing? Does she have to go across the room to ask for that? Or is she sitting next to her or standing near her? How long does that conversation take, do you think? Are people wondering and chatting? What are they talking about? What's she going to say in response? By now, the guests know what's happening because it tells us that he has to go through with it because of the oaths he's publicly made, and his guests are there and he doesn't want to be embarrassed. So by now, everyone knows. Are people clocking this is going to be really difficult? He can't get out of this. Is he already regretting whatever she says? I slightly regret it. I've spoken before I really thought this through. And then she says the words, give me here on a platter the head of John the Baptist. Does the world stop still for everyone in the room in a moment when she says that? Are there gasps of breath, intakes? People are like, oh, anything but that. Why would you mess with that? This guy's a prophet. This guy is spiritual. Like, why would you mess with that? Or are people elated and excited at the thought of doing something so outrageous? They're going to witness, they've got ringside seats to this intense encounter in a world that was not used to that level of drama all the time. This is very entertaining, maybe. And yet still they don't really realize the consequences. And then in comes the head on the platter. And it's presented to the daughter of Herodias, who in turn gives it to her mother. What is that like? How does that happen? What do people say? Are they gossiping? Are they whispering? Does anyone vomit, actually? Is it just so awful, either in just physical presence of a beheaded head, or in its significance, with people realizing what it means? Is anyone sick? John's disciples came and took his body and buried it, and then they went and told Jesus. What was that like for them? Coming into the palace, going into the prison. Can we have his head? No. Can we have his body though? Yeah, get rid of it, yeah. How did that conversation go? Were they crying? Were they angry? Were they sad? Were they distressed? Were they panicking? Did they feel lost? Did they go into pragmatic mode? Where did they bury it? What did they wrap it in? How many of them did it take to carry it? And how far away was Jesus? They had to make that journey from the palace or from the burial to where Jesus was. How did Jesus and his disciples respond in the immediate moment of being told? Did they weep together? Did they hug? Okay. Take another 2 minutes to press pause and then leave 2 minutes of silence just to allow your imagination to finish its process. And then discuss again in twos. What was that like for you? How did God speak to you in this moment? After you've discussed that, why don't you pray together as a whole group? Maybe some things have stirred, have come up for you. So maybe some new things for you that you want to share with the group. So do that after you've discussed in pairs and finish by praying together.